"Thief!" Harold Vance roared, his boots crashing through Taza's tent under Arizona's moonlit sky. Taza shoved Nita behind him as Vance's men loomed, their accusations slicing like knives. Nita's trembling hand clutched a stone, her eyes wide with panic, when Vance lunged, knocking her to the ground. Taza's rage flared. His leather knife grazed Vance's arm, drawing blood. Shouts erupted, branding Taza a criminal, forcing him to choose, flee with Nita or surrender to save her. Taza, a 29-year-old Apache leatherworker in 1894 Arizona, carves beauty from hide but lives under the weight of loss and scorn. His parents died in a militia raid, leaving him to shield his 18-year-old sister, Nita, whose mind broke at a white boarding school. Taza's heart aches for Clara, a white aid worker, but their love is a secret, shunned by both their worlds. Torn between saving Nita and chasing a forbidden dream, Taza fights to protect his family and honor in a land that brands him an outcast. Taza's heart pounded as he grabbed a worn leather satchel, stuffing it with a blanket and a water flask. Nita clung to his arm, her whispers trembling with memories of the boarding school's cold walls. He led her out of the tent, the Arizona night swallowing their shadows as they slipped into the desert. Taza scanned the horizon, ears sharp for hoofbeats, and found a shallow cave hidden by jagged rocks. Nita curled up inside, her fingers tracing circles on a smooth stone, a habit to calm her racing mind. Taza lit a small fire, its glow barely touching the darkness, and knelt beside her, guilt gnawing at him for failing to shield her from Vance's cruelty. He murmured a promise to keep her safe, though doubt tightened his chest. Clara hunched over a flickering candle in her small room, scribbling a note promising medicine for Nita. She slipped it to an Apache boy at the market, her eyes darting to avoid the gaze of patrolling militiamen. Her heart raced as she pretended to haggle over potatoes, the note's weight heavy in her mind. The boy reached Taza by dusk, pressing the paper into his calloused hand. Taza read it under starlight, hope flickering but tempered by fear for Clara's safety. He scratched a thank you on a scrap of hide, sending it back through the boy. Nita stirred, her feverish eyes watching him, and Taza prayed Clara's risk wouldn't be in vain. Nita's fever spiked, her body shaking as she mumbled about locked doors and cruel voices. Taza pressed a damp cloth to her forehead, his hands steady but his heart frantic. He rummaged through his satchel, finding only a few dried herbs, useless against her rising heat. Nita gripped his wrist, begging him not to leave, her voice small and broken. Taza swore he'd find help, though the desert stretched endlessly around them. He stared at the cave's mouth, the distant lights of town tempting but dangerous. Militia could be anywhere, and the thought of losing Nita tore at him. He kissed her brow, resolving to risk the journey for her sake. Clara tied a scarf over her hair, slipping out of town with a pouch of medicine tucked under her shawl. She took a winding path through the desert, her boots crunching softly on sand, eyes scanning for militia. At the cave, she handed Taza the pouch, her voice low as she checked Nita's pulse. She whispered about rumors of Vance's secrets at the mine, her words sparking Taza's curiosity. He thanked her, his gratitude mixed with dread as she prepared to leave. Clara squeezed his hand, promising to be careful, but Taza's stomach knotted at the risk she took. As she vanished into the night, a shadow moved in the distance, Floyd's eyes glinting with suspicion. Floyd stepped from the darkness, blocking Clara's path, his voice a low growl as he demanded to know her business. Clara's pulse hammered, but she forced a calm smile, claiming she'd been gathering herbs. Floyd's sneer deepened, his hand resting on his pistol, warning her against helping Taza. She nodded, heart pounding, and he let her pass, his gaze burning into her back. Clara hurried home, her hands shaking as she locked the door. She scribbled her fears about Vance in a journal, hiding it under a floorboard. For Taza and Nita, she vowed to keep going, her resolve hardened by the injustice she'd witnessed. Taza waded through the shallow stream, the water's strange odor stinging his nose. He spotted a rusted metal vial half buried in the mud, its contents reeking of decay. His gut twisted, sensing a link to the mine's waste. He tucked the vial into his belt, glancing at the stream where dead fish floated, their scales dull under the moon. Taza's mind raced, connecting Clara's rumors to the poisoned water. He returned to the cave, hiding the vial in his satchel, and sat by Nita, her shallow breaths urging him to act. The weight of discovery pressed on him, a spark of purpose amid his fear. A rustle outside the cave snapped Taza's head up, his hand on his knife. A cloaked Apache, face hidden by a leather mask, dropped a carved hide scrap and vanished. Taza snatched it, tracing the strange symbols that mirrored marks near the mine. He called out, but only silence answered, the desert swallowing the stranger. Suspicion gnawed at him, wondering if this was Vance's trap or an ally's clue. He showed the scrap to Nita, her eyes distant as she clutched her stone. Taza pocketed the hide, his resolve to uncover the truth growing, though uncertainty shadowed every step. Hoofbeats echoed, and Taza doused the fire, pulling Nita into the cave's depths. Militia voices carried on the wind, their lanterns casting jagged shadows near the entrance. Taza held Nita close, her trembling body pressed against him as she bit her lip to stay silent. A soldier paused, his boots scuffing the dirt just outside, and Taza's grip tightened on his knife. The man moved on, cursing the empty desert, and the hoofbeats faded. Taza exhaled, but the close call burned in his mind. He knew they couldn't stay, and with Nita's fever lingering, he decided to move deeper into the desert at dawn. Taza carried Nita through the night, her weight heavy in his arms, until they reached an Apache camp. He found Hastiin, the elder, and pleaded for shelter, his voice raw with desperation. Hastiin's eyes narrowed, accusing Taza of bringing trouble with his fight against Vance. Taza stood tall, insisting the mine threatened their people, but Hastiin waved him off, skeptical of his motives. He allowed Nita to stay in a tent, watched by an elder woman, but offered Taza no warriors. Taza kissed Nita's forehead, promising to return, and left the camp, isolation biting deeper than the desert cold. Vance summoned Clara to his mine office, his voice sharp as he questioned her charity to Nita. Clara clasped her hands, claiming she helped all in need, her tone steady despite her racing heart. Vance leaned closer, his eyes searching for lies, and asked if she'd seen Taza. Clara shook her head, her throat tight, and he dismissed her, ordering Floyd to tail her. She stepped into the dusty street, her resolve unshaken but her fear growing. At home, she tucked a note about Vance's cruelty into her journal, determined to stand by Taza, no matter the cost. Taza sat alone in the new cave, the carved hide from the leathermaker spread before him. He traced the symbols with a calloused finger, their sharp lines matching marks he'd seen near the mine. His brow furrowed as he scratched the pattern into the dirt, piecing together a rough map. The vial of foul liquid sat nearby, its stench linking to Clara's whispers about Vance's secrets. Taza's chest tightened, torn between Nita's safety and the urge to uncover the truth. He gripped his knife, its familiar weight grounding him, and decided to infiltrate the mine. Nita's soft breathing echoed in the cave, a reminder of his promise to protect her. He tucked the hide away, his heart heavy with the risk ahead. Taza crept through the desert night, the mine's looming silhouette lit by flickering torches. He slipped past a dozing guard, his breath shallow, and found a storage shed filled with barrels and papers. The air reeked of the same decay as the vial, confirming his fears. Taza rifled through documents, his fingers trembling as he uncovered letters detailing Vance's plan to falsify Apache land records. He stuffed the papers into his shirt, heart racing, when a creak made him freeze. A shadow moved outside, and he ducked behind a barrel. The guard passed, oblivious, but Taza's pulse thundered as he slipped back into the night. Floyd's lantern swung as he entered the shed, his eyes narrowing at the disturbed barrels. He shouted for Taza, his voice sharp with menace, and drew his pistol. Taza burst from his hiding spot, shoving Floyd hard, the lantern crashing to the ground. A shot rang out, grazing Taza's arm, and he stumbled into the desert, blood seeping through his sleeve. Floyd's curses echoed as he rallied the guards, their boots pounding behind. Taza wove through rocks, pain searing his arm, and collapsed behind a boulder, clutching the stolen papers. His breath came in gasps, fear and defiance warring within him as the mine's alarms blared. A cloaked figure emerged from the shadows, the leathermaker's masked face barely visible. He tossed a stone, drawing Floyd's men away, and pulled Taza to his feet, leading him through a hidden trail. Taza demanded answers, his voice hoarse, but the leathermaker stayed silent, his eyes unreadable. They reached a narrow canyon, safe for now, and the stranger handed Taza another carved hide before vanishing. Taza leaned against the rock, pain throbbing in his arm, and studied the new symbols, suspicion swirling. He bandaged his wound with a torn strip of cloth, grateful yet wary. The papers in his shirt felt like a burning weight, urging him to keep fighting. Taza sat in the canyon, the stolen letters spread before him under faint starlight. His eyes scanned Vance's words, revealing a plot with a silver baron named Carter to seize Apache land. The papers described forged reports labeling the land unused, a lie to drive his people away. Taza's fists clenched, rage boiling at the betrayal. He thought of Nita, her fragile hope, and vowed to expose Vance. He hid the letters in his satchel, his wounded arm aching with every move. The leathermaker's silence gnawed at him, but the truth in his hands fueled his resolve. Taza stood, ready to act, though fear lingered like a shadow. Nita's voice woke Taza at the Apache camp, her words slurred with fevered dreams of a poisoned stream. She clutched his hand, describing water turned red, her eyes wide with terror. Taza's heart sank, the vial's stench flashing in his mind, tying her dream to reality. He stroked her hair, promising to save their sacred stream, his voice thick with emotion. Nita's trembling eased, but her weakness scared him. He showed her the vial, explaining his suspicions, and her nod urged him on. Taza felt the weight of her trust, his determination hardening as he planned to test the water. Her dreams, he swore, would not come true. Taza knelt by the stream at dawn, the water's sour smell confirming his fears. He filled a small gourd, noting its cloudy hue, and spotted a rusted pipe leaking from the mine's direction. His anger flared as he traced the pipe, finding more dead fish along the bank. He smashed the pipe with a rock, but the flow continued, mocking his efforts. Taza wrapped the gourd tightly, deciding to send it to Clara for proof. He glanced back at the camp, Nita's frail form in his mind, and hurried to the meeting point. The stream's betrayal cut deep, pushing him to fight harder. Clara met the Apache messenger at dusk, her hands trembling as she took the gourd of tainted water. She slipped into the town's clinic, convincing a trusted doctor to test it under the guise of charity work. The results came quickly. The water carried mine waste, deadly and deliberate. Clara's stomach churned as she wrote the findings, hiding them in her journal. She sent a note to Taza, confirming the poison, her heart heavy with the truth's danger. The doctor's wary glance made her fear exposure, but she steeled herself. For Taza and Nita, she'd risk everything, her resolve a quiet fire. Vance stormed through the mine office, slamming his fist on the desk as Floyd reported the shed's breach. He ordered more guards, their rifles glinting under torchlight, and checked the remaining papers, cursing Taza's name. His eyes gleamed with paranoia, sensing the Apache's growing threat. Vance barked at Baxter to hunt Taza down, promising a reward for his capture. He burned a stack of old reports, the smoke curling like his anger, hoping to erase his tracks. Floyd nodded, eager for violence, and Vance's confidence wavered, the stolen letters haunting him. The mine's secrets, he swore, would stay buried. Taza knelt by Nita's side in the camp, her fevered eyes searching his face. He whispered an apology, his voice breaking, for dragging her through this ordeal. Nita's hand touched his, weak but warm, and she gave him a drawing of a clear stream, her hope etched in every line. Taza's throat tightened, tears pricking his eyes, as he promised to bring her to a doctor. He held her close, her heartbeat, a fragile rhythm against his chest. The drawing fueled his fire, a reminder of why he fought. Taza stood, clutching the vial and letters, ready to face Vance, Nita's strength guiding him. Floyd's shadow loomed as he trailed Clara through the desert dusk, his boots silent on the sand. She sensed his presence, her heart pounding, but kept her pace steady, clutching the shawl that hid her note for Taza. Floyd stepped forward, his voice a harsh whisper, accusing her of aiding a fugitive. Clara's breath caught, but she lied, saying she was visiting a sick friend. He grabbed her arm, dragging her toward a shed near the mine, and locked her inside, his warning to stay away from Taza ringing in her ears. Clara sank to the floor, fear clawing at her, but she slipped a desperate message through a crack, hoping someone would find it. A young Apache boy spotted the paper, his small hand snatching it before running to Taza. Clara curled up, her resolve flickering but unbroken, determined to protect Nita and Taza. Taza's blood ran cold as the boy handed him Clara's crumpled note, her words scrawled in panic. He memorized the shed's location, his jaw tight with fury at Floyd's cruelty. Under the cover of night, he slipped into town, his knife glinting as he dodged patrolling militiamen. At the shed, he pried the lock open, finding Clara trembling but unharmed. Floyd's footsteps crunched nearby, and Taza tackled him, fists flying in a blur of rage. He pulled Clara free, their breaths ragged as they fled into the desert. Baxter's shouts echoed behind, signaling a manhunt, and Taza's heart sank, knowing they were both targets now. He gripped Clara's hand, vowing to keep her safe. The desert night roared with chaos as Baxter's militia thundered after Taza and Clara, their lanterns bobbing like angry stars. Taza pulled Clara through a maze of boulders, her gasps sharp with fear. Bullets whizzed past, one grazing Taza's shoulder, but he pushed on, shielding her. He shoved Clara into a narrow crevice, standing guard as a militiaman charged. Taza's knife flashed, felling the man, but more closed in, their shouts deafening. Despair gripped him until the leathermaker appeared, his cloak a blur as he led them to a hidden canyon. Taza collapsed against the rock, Clara's hand in his, their survival a fragile victory. The militia's cries faded, but the danger lingered like a storm. The leathermaker stood silent in the canyon, his mask hiding all but his steady gaze. He handed Taza a new carved hide, its symbols pointing to a secret cache of Vance's documents. Taza demanded to know his motives, his voice raw, but the stranger only nodded toward the hide. The leathermaker warned of militia nearby. His words clipped, then vanished into the night. Taza studied the symbols, his mind racing with possibilities, and shared them with Clara, her eyes bright with hope. They bandaged Taza's shoulder, pain pulsing with every move. The hide felt like a lifeline, urging Taza to strike at Vance's heart. He steeled himself, ready for the next move. Taza slipped back to the Apache camp, the stolen letters heavy in his satchel. He found Hastiin by the fire, his face stern, and laid out the papers, detailing Vance's land theft. Hastine's eyes flicked over the words, doubt softening into curiosity. but he accused Taza of risking the tribe's safety. Taza's voice rose, passionate, swearing to protect their legacy. Hastiin demanded proof through action, not words, but agreed to send 2 warriors to watch Taza. Taza knelt, gratitude mixing with frustration, and checked on Nita, her fevered sleep a constant ache. He left the camp, the weight of Hastien's challenge driving him forward. The fight, he knew, was far from over. Taza and Clara crept toward the mine's edge, guided by the leathermaker's hide. They found a locked shed, its door weathered but sturdy, and Taza pried it open with his knife. Inside, stacks of papers revealed Vance's deal with Carter, complete with forged land surveys. Clara copied key lines by moonlight, her hands steady despite the cold. A guard's cough made them freeze, hearts pounding, and they hid beneath a tarp as footsteps passed. Taza grabbed a bundle of documents, his pulse racing, but a lantern's glow signaled more guards. They slipped out, running low through the desert, the papers a dangerous prize. The mine's alarms wailed behind, marking them as thieves in the night. Vance's men stormed the Apache camp at dawn, their rifles gleaming as they seized Hastiin, binding his wrists. Vance's voice boomed, threatening to hang the elder unless Taza surrendered. A warrior escaped, racing to Taza with the news, his words a knife to Taza's heart. He clutched the stolen papers, guilt flooding him for endangering Hastiin. Clara urged him to save the elder first, her eyes fierce with conviction. Taza's mind spun, the fight against Vance now tangled with Hastien's life. He gathered his knife, and the warriors Hastiin had spared, rage and fear warring within. The camp's safety, he swore, would not be Vance's victory. Taza huddled with the 2 Apache warriors in a desert hollow, sketching a plan to raid Vance's camp. He proposed a midnight strike, using the dark to slip past guards. Clara offered to distract the militia, but Taza refused, her safety too precious to risk. The warriors suggested luring guards into a narrow pass where rocks could slow them. Taza assigned roles, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. He carved a small Apache symbol into his palm, a silent prayer for strength. The warriors nodded, their eyes hard with resolve, and Taza felt the weight of their trust. Hastien's life hung in the balance, driving him to act. Taza led the warriors through the night, their steps silent as they neared Vance's camp. They lit a small fire to draw the guards, smoke curling into the sky, and waited in ambush. Taza's heart raced as he cut Hastien's ropes, the elder's face bruised but defiant. Gunfire erupted, a warrior falling with a cry, and Taza dragged Hastiin behind a crate. He fought off a guard, his knife flashing, blood staining the sand. The warriors pushed back the militia, giving Taza time to pull Hastiin free. They fled into the desert, Hastien's weight heavy on Taza's shoulder. The elders whispered thanks fueled Taza's resolve, though the cost of the fight lingered. Nita's screams pierced the camp as Taza returned, her body thrashing in a fevered panic. She clawed at her blanket, shouting about locked doors and shadowed hands. Taza dropped to her side, his voice soft as he sang an Apache lullaby, tears stinging his eyes. Nita's cries faded, but her trembling hands gripped his, her fear a mirror of his own. He checked her medicine, finding only a few drops left, despair sinking in. The fight for Hastiin had delayed his plans, and Nita's worsening state tore at him. Taza held her close, promising to find more help, her fragility a fire urging him to act. He stood, resolve hardened, knowing time was slipping away. Clara's hands shook as she wrapped the stolen documents in cloth, entrusting them to an Apache messenger under the cover of dusk. She scribbled a letter to a federal journalist, her words urgent, exposing Vance's plot to poison the stream and steal Apache land. The messenger slipped away, dodging militia patrols, and delivered the package to a post office beyond town. Clara's heart raced, fearing interception, but she whispered a prayer for Taza and Nita. Back in her room, she hid her journal deeper under the floorboards, its pages heavy with truth. The messenger returned, confirming the letter's departure, and Clara's shoulders sagged with cautious hope. She sat by her window, the desert night vast and unforgiving, her resolve a flickering flame against the looming danger. Vance stormed into the mine's storage shed, his face red as Floyd reported the latest theft. He ordered the remaining documents burned, flames licking the papers as smoke choked the air. His voice thundered, cursing Taza's persistence, and he kicked a crate, splintering wood. Vance summoned Baxter, demanding Taza's capture, his paranoia swelling with each missing letter. Floyd grinned, eager to hunt, but Vance's confidence cracked, sensing his empire unraveling. He stared at the fire, the ashes mocking his control, and vowed to crush Taza. The mine's secrets, he swore, would die in those flames, but doubt gnawed at his core. The leathermaker met Taza in a moonless desert hollow, his mask gone, revealing a weathered Apache face. He confessed to being Carter's former worker, fired for opposing the stream's poisoning, his voice heavy with regret. He offered a witness, another miner who saw the waste dumped, and handed Taza a final carved hide, its symbols faded but clear. Taza's eyes narrowed, questioning the man's silence until now. But gratitude softened his suspicion. The leathermaker urged haste, warning of Vance's desperation, and slipped away, leaving Taza alone. Taza clutched the hide, his heart torn between trust and caution, and planned to meet the witness. Nita's frail form flashed in his mind, pushing him to act. Taza gathered the Apache camp around a fire, his voice steady as he called for a unity ceremony to expose Vance. He helped build a circle of stones, each one a vow to protect their land, and shared the poisoned vial's truth. Hastiin stood, his wounds bandaged, urging the tribe to trust Taza, his doubt fading. Nita, weak but present, offered a trembling drawing of their stream, her hope a quiet spark. Taza's chest swelled with pride, but fear of militia lingered. He assigned warriors to guard the ceremony, their bows ready, and prayed for strength. The fire's glow lit their faces, a fragile unity against the coming storm. Baxter's militia charged into the ceremony, rifles cracking as screams shattered the night. Taza yanked Nita behind a rock, her gasps sharp with terror, and drew his knife. Warriors fired arrows, felling 2 militiamen, but Hastiin staggered, blood seeping from a bullet in his shoulder. Taza roared, tackling a soldier, his blade flashing in the firelight. The camp erupted in chaos, tents collapsing as flames spread. Taza dragged Hastiin to safety, his heart pounding, and rallied the warriors to push back. The militia retreated, their shouts fading, but the ceremony lay in ruins. Taza knelt by Hastiin, guilt and rage burning, vowing to make Vance pay. Clara slipped into Mrs. Vance's parlor, her voice low as she begged the woman to betray her husband's crimes. Mrs. Vance's hands trembled, admitting she knew of the poisoned stream, her eyes haunted by shame. Clara promised safety if she testified, her words fierce with conviction. Mrs. Vance nodded, demanding a secret meeting with a journalist, fear etching her face. Clara arranged it through the Apache messenger, her pulse racing with the risk. She left the house, the night heavy with tension, and hid a note for Taza, urging him to trust her. Mrs. Vance's choice felt like a crack in Vance's armor, but Clara's fear for Taza lingered. Floyd's blade caught Taza's arm during the ceremony's chaos, blood soaking his sleeve as he stumbled. He swung back, his knife grazing Floyd's side, fury driving his blows. A warrior pulled Taza to a tent, wrapping his wound with torn cloth, pain searing with every breath. Taza's eyes searched for Nita, panic rising until he saw her safe. Hastiin groaned nearby, his injury grave, and Taza's guilt surged for failing to protect them. He stood swaying as the militia's retreat echoed in the distance. The warrior's nod gave him strength, and Taza clutched his knife, resolve hardening despite his weakening body. Nita's fevered hands moved weakly, sketching a final drawing of the tribe united by the stream. She pressed it into Taza's hands, her voice a whisper, saying it was her dream for their people. Taza's throat tightened, tears falling as he traced the lines, her hope piercing his heart. Nita's eyes, dim but fierce, urged him to fight on. He hung the drawing in the tent, its colors a beacon in the dark. Her shallow breath scared him, each one a reminder of time slipping away. Taza kissed her forehead, promising to honor her vision, his love for her a fire against despair. The federal journalist stepped into the Apache camp, his notebook ready as the messenger led him to Taza. He read Clara's letter, his eyes widening at the evidence of Vance's crimes, and questioned Taza, scribbling every word. Taza shared the vial and letters, his voice raw with urgency, detailing the poisoned stream. The journalist promised to publish the story, his tone firm but cautious, warning of Vance's influence. He photographed the camp's scars, the ceremony's ruins a silent testimony. Taza's heart lifted, hope battling exhaustion, but the journalist's glance toward the horizon hinted at trouble. Vance's shadow loomed, and Taza braced for retaliation. Taza and Clara met in a desert hollow, their faces lit by a small fire as they planned a protest at the town hall. Taza spread Nita's drawing, its image their rally's heart, and assigned warriors to protect the crowd. Clara rallied sympathetic townsfolk, her voice steady despite her fear of Baxter's men. They crafted banners, Nita's stream painted bold, a call for justice. Taza's wounds ached, but Clara's hand on his arm gave him strength. He feared Vance's next move, his gut tight with dread. But the protest felt like their last stand. They stood together, united, ready to face the town and demand the truth. Carter stormed into Vance's mine office, his polished boots clicking on the wooden floor, his face twisted with rage. He slammed a fist on the desk, blaming Vance for letting Taza steal damning evidence. Carter ordered Taza's death before the town hall protest, his voice cold and final. Vance nodded, sweat beading on his brow, but his heart sank, fearing Carter's loyalty was slipping. He summoned Floyd, tasking him with an ambush, his words sharp with desperation. Carter inspected the mine's waste pipes, ensuring no traces remained, and warned Vance of ruin if the truth surfaced. Vance clutched his chair, his empire crumbling, and swore to silence Taza. The air grew heavy, betrayal lurking in Carter's calculating stare. The leathermaker led Taza to a dusty canyon, where a nervous miner waited, his hands stained from mine work. The miner recounted dumping waste into the stream under Vance's orders, his voice shaking with guilt. He handed Taza another vial of toxic sludge, its stench choking the air. Taza questioned the miner's silence, his tone firm but grateful, and the man vowed to testify. The leathermaker urged Taza to deliver the miner to the journalist, his eyes urgent. Taza sent the miner through an Apache messenger, hope rising despite his wounds. He gripped the vial, Nita's drawing flashing in his mind, and steeled himself for the fight ahead. The leathermaker nodded, fading into the desert, leaving Taza with a spark of victory. Nita's breath grew shallow in the Apache tent, her fever burning through the last of her strength. Taza held her hand, his voice cracking as he fed her the final drops of medicine. She whispered of her pride in him, her eyes dim but warm, and smiled faintly. Her chest stilled, and Taza's world shattered, tears streaming as he clutched her lifeless hand. He wrapped her in a blanket, his sobs echoing, and laid her drawing beside her. Warriors gathered, chanting a soft Apache farewell, their voices heavy with loss. Taza's heart broke, but Nita's courage fueled his resolve. He stood, vowing to honor her by exposing Vance, her sacrifice of fire in his soul. Taza led the Apache tribe to the town hall, Nita's drawing raised high on a banner, its colors bold against the morning sky. Clara joined him, rallying townsfolk who clutched signs demanding justice. Taza's voice boomed, reading Vance's letters and showing the toxic vial, his wounds aching but his spirit fierce. Townspeople gasped, their murmurs growing to shouts, and Clara urged them to stand against the mine. Warriors stood guard, bows ready, as militia lingered at the edges. The journalist scribbled furiously, capturing Taza's words and the crowd's anger. Taza's eyes burned with Nita's memory, driving him to demand the truth. The air crackled with tension, a town on the brink of revolt. Vance pushed through the crowd, his face pale as he shouted denials, claiming Taza's evidence was forged. Taza held up the vial, his voice thunderous, accusing Vance of poisoning the stream. The miner stepped forward, his testimony damning, and townspeople roared, their trust in Vance shattered. Vance's eyes darted, seeking escape, but warriors blocked his path, their faces stern. The journalist shouted questions, his pen flying, and Clara pointed to the letters, her voice unwavering. Vance stammered, blaming Carter, but the crowd's jeers drowned him out. Taza stood tall, Nita's drawing behind him, feeling the tide turn. The town hall shook with the people's fury, justice within reach. Baxter's badge glinted as federal marshals surrounded him outside the town hall, their rifles steady. The journalist presented the letters and vial, his voice firm, and marshals cuffed Baxter, his face twisting in shock. Baxter shouted Vance's name, confessing orders to hunt Taza, his words a betrayal. Marshals searched his office, finding more letters linking him to the mine's crimes. Townspeople cheered, their voices a wave, as Baxter was led away. Taza watched, relief mixing with grief for Nita, and Clara squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with hope. The marshals turned toward Vance, and Taza braced for the final confrontation. Baxter's fall was a crack in Vance's armor, but the fight wasn't over. Carter's telegram reached the journalist, publicly disowning Vance and claiming ignorance of the mine's crimes. The message, printed in the morning paper, branded Vance the sole villain, and townspeople whispered in outrage. Carter fled Arizona, his private coach rattling away, protecting his silver empire. Vance read the telegram in his office, his hands shaking, fury boiling at the betrayal. He barked at Floyd to prepare an escape, his voice frantic, but the militia's loyalty wavered. Taza heard the news at the camp, his jaw tight, knowing Carter's escape was a half-victory. The crowd's anger turned fully on Vance, and Taza felt Nita's spirit urging him forward. Carter's retreat left Vance alone, a cornered beast. Taza and the warriors tracked Vance to a crumbling shack near the mine, his horse tethered outside. Vance aimed a pistol as Taza kicked the door open, his eyes wild with fear. Taza dodged a shot, tackling Vance, the gun skidding across the floor. Warriors bound Vance's wrists, their movements swift, and dragged him into the desert light. Townspeople gathered, their shouts for justice deafening, as marshals took Vance from Taza's hands. Taza handed over the vial and letters, his voice steady despite his wounds. Vance's head hung, defeated, and Taza felt a hollow triumph, Nita's absence a heavy ache. The shack's dust settled, marking the end of Vance's reign. Marshals swarmed the mine, halting operations as they tested the stream, confirming the poison's source. They seized waste barrels, their contents reeking, and ordered the pipes dismantled. The federal investigation turned to Carter's company, subpoenas flying as evidence mounted. The stream began to clear, fish flickering in its depths, and the Apache held a quiet ceremony, giving thanks. Taza stood by the water, Nita's drawing in his hands, his heart torn between loss and hope. The journalist's article spread, condemning Vance, and townspeople vowed to protect the land. Taza's resolve hardened, knowing the fight had saved his people's home. The stream's revival was Nita's legacy, etched in every ripple. Taza stood in the Apache camp, respected as a leader, his leatherwork now a symbol of resilience. Clara joined him, their love accepted by the tribe, and they planned a cultural sanctuary, Nita's drawing its heart. Vance and Carter faced trials, convicted for poisoning and land theft, their names cursed. The stream flowed clean, the land secure, and the tribe's spirit soared. Taza hung Nita's drawing in his tent, her memory a guiding light, and wept for her sacrifice. He vowed to honor her by guarding Apache heritage, his purpose clear. The desert bloomed, a testament to their victory, and Taza found peace, Nita's love forever in his heart.